Let's go, folks. Time for the Gibby Show.
How you doing, baseball fans? Happy Halloween to you. If you're out there celebrating, as you see I am, welcome to another edition of the Gibby Show. My name is John Arezzi. I'm here with one of baseball's incredible personalities, the two-time manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, the upcoming author, Mr. Baseball lifer himself, direct from San Antonio, Mr. John Gibbons. John, happy Halloween to you, man.
Hey, you're an imposter. You're not John Arezzi. I think you're Bartolo Colon.
Oh, you're not supposed to say that. You ruined
Oh, I can't. Well, like people aren't going to notice? I'm going, friggin', hey, if you start speaking, maybe we gotta do this show, if you drop a little Espanol.
Yeah.
And, let me see the back of that shirt. What does that shirt say, Arezzi?
No, this is, do you see it?
Oh, I knew it. I thought that.
This is actually a game-used Bartolo Colon jersey. Two reasons for that, John. One, he's a pretty robust, big dude like myself, so it's kind of the only game-used player other than Daniel Vogelbach that I could actually wear a game-used jersey.
Bambino.
That's right. He's kind of like the Bambino. And secondly, I always really dug Colon. I thought he had a lot of heart, just came in and provided tons of entertainment for the Mets fans, including that home run that he hit in San Diego. I'll never forget that moment. One of the best in my memory as far as being a baseball fan.
Yeah, baseball, that's what it's entertainment. Here's a perfect example. A guy, he looked different, a big, strong dude, and great pitcher and all that. But it kind of reminded me, remember David Wells was pitching for the Yankees? He got a hold of it was a Babe Ruth hat, right? He wore it in the game.
He had the original, he had Babe Ruth's hat on his head.
That's what baseball was, baseball. Sorry.
Right.
Anyway.
I mean, it certainly was. And, for me, it's Halloween, so why not dress up? And, it is Halloween as we tape this episode today. What about yourself growing up in Massachusetts? What was Halloween like up there when you were growing up? And some of your maybe favorite or non-favorite costumes that you wore as a kid?
Back then, because I've got three kids of my own when they're young. Back then, you didn't care. The parents turn you loose. You go to Halloween. Nowadays, you got to go with them. It seems like. I think a lot of times I was a pirate, if I remember right. Or a couple times maybe a ghost. Something simple, so we didn't get too carried away in our household. But I can remember in growing up in Texas, it was funny. It's like we had two nights of Halloween, and nobody could. There was one year nobody really knew what day it was on or something. Right? I'm not making that up. It's like, so we went out two different times, but I can remember too. You as a young kid, you take the pillowcase.
Yes.
And as a young kid, you're dragging around. You had so much candy, and next thing you know, it wears a hole, and you come home with no candy because it's all strewn all over the street. So
yeah, back in the day, we'd fill up the pillowcase, and then we'd run home and empty it out and go back out again. Yeah. And those were the days where you could go out, and your parents would be like, all right, just don't get in trouble. And, like today, you need security guards to accompany the kids up and down the blocks. But back in the 60s, man, it was kind of it was a great time to grow up. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is a fun day. So.
Yep. But anyway, we got a lot of baseball to cover today. We will be on this episode. We'll have part 2 of that wonderful interview with Alex Anthopoulos. I mean, part 1 last week, part 2 today. He's going to dig a lot deeper into his days with the Jays, and we look forward to doing that part 2 today. Of course, we're going to talk about the World Series, and we also have some more questions for you on the Ask Gibby segment brought to you by Budweiser. So we have an exciting show for everybody again this week, John.
Yeah, it's good. Alex is so good, and he really opens up quite a bit and tells some pretty interesting stuff that I really didn't even realize at all. But it's it was a pleasure and honor to have him on this show, and he's one of the good guys, and it just shows nice guys don't always finish last. My mother used to tell me that, hey, nice guys finish last. I said, really? That shouldn't be that way. But you know what else my mother told me? She goes, son, remember, money can't buy you everything, right? And I said, yeah. She goes, but poor can't buy you nothing. So go set your dreams and goals and go for it. So anyway,
There you go. And your mom obviously still with us, and you spend a lot of time with her too.
yeah, she's
Yeah.
still going strong, and it's amazing. She'll throw her 2 cents in on the show too. You know, she'll say
Oh,
she
oh,
loves
really?
watching it, but oh yeah, like I told you at first, she says, John, your face is too close to the camera, your head's too big, so back it up, and the little things like that. You know, so she's still giving instruction. God bless her.
Yes, indeed. Well, let's get to the lead off. We have some news to cover, some Jays news, and some interesting stuff going on. It was not the heaviest news week for the Blue Jays. The biggest news to report is that Toronto outfielder George Springer underwent successful elbow surgery to remove the bone spur from his right elbow. Springer skipped the All-Star game this year with elbow pain. He was out for another 10 days in August, and the team said he'd be ready for spring training. The surgery was performed in Dallas by Dr. Keith Meister. Springer had to stay in Toronto for several days before getting the surgery because of the concussion that took place in the Game 2 loss in the wild card game against the Seattle Mariners when he collided with shortstop Bo Bichette, chasing that blooper that will live in infamy now. Spring is 33 years old. He played 133 games this year, hitting 267 with 25 home runs. He had 76 RBIs. He had 14 stolen bases, but he did miss significant time in 2021 because of oblique and quad injuries and a sprained left knee. He signed the largest deal in the history of the Blue Jays, 6 years, $150 million in 21. He's got 3 years to go in this deal, and the Jays really need a healthy Springer for next year. How do you keep the guy in the field? Has he been a bit, in your opinion, has he been a disappointment since getting 150 million for 6 years? Let's talk about Springer a little bit and what his role is going to be next year. They need him to come back, and they need him to come back strong.
Well, Bartolo, he's a key guy to that team. There's no doubt about it. And when he's on the field, good things happen. But he's been a little bit snake bit, his whole career. He gets
Yeah,
injured a lot. And I guess the amazing part, what I don't get, we in the sport nowadays, in all the sports, they all these new techniques for training to keep guys healthy and cut down on injuries. I think guys are hurt more than they ever been, and it's almost
they
like
are.
it's part of it's a mindset. We let some of these guys. Well, if you banged up, you need take a few days. Blah blah blah. Where it used to be, get out there and play because somebody's going to take your job if you don't, right? And but he's a key guy. Not only is he very productive, he's an enthusiastic guy, and he kind of generates that out of a team, but they need him, but he has been snake bit with a lot of injuries, and that concussion thing. Yeah, that's the. It's funny. I had like 3 or 4 concussions growing up, and you didn't think anything of it from playing football and then even in baseball. But I can remember one year when Aaron Hill was with us, and it would have been '08, I think, I guess, because David Eckstein was the or no, what is it? John McDonald. It was one of our smaller shortstops, right? We were playing a game. I think it was out in Oakland, and they collided, and Aaron Hill went down. And this was like it might have been in June or something. He missed the rest of the season with. But when you said Springer had to stay in Toronto because he couldn't travel or whatever, I can remember Hill getting on the plane right after after that game. We were flying somewhere else, and so who knows? So I guess my point is things have changed so much, and
Yeah.
I gotta argue. I don't think necessarily for the better, if you want to know the truth. So anyway,
Yeah, I mean, certainly is. There's a lot of that in the game today. I mean, just the over caring of players. Obviously, in the old days, you'd get back out on the field and you do it. But everyone has protocols today. But they need Springer back. He is a bona fide superstar.
oh yeah.
They invested a ton of money in him, and everybody wants to see him come back and have the best 2023 he's ever had. So we wish him well.
Yeah, but you got to watch out for them concussions. That's you really got
Yes.
to pay attention to that stuff.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I
Yeah,
mean, look what's happening in football right now, and the new protocols that they have there for, guys getting hit in the head, and you have to,
right.
err on the side of safety for these athletes for sure. Going another topic that's been circulating this week is the rotation for the Jays next year. There's three spots that are locked in. Obviously with Alec Manoa, Kevin Gausman, Jose Barrios, they're pretty much locked in. Ross Stripling is a free agent. And then you have Husei Kikuchi competing for a spot. So there's a lot of question marks in regard to the Jays. And one report I heard this week was that because of the major injury with Ryu, that the team fully insured his contract, and so the $20 million that they were going to be paying him could go back into payroll next year. So there could be some flexibility money wise. But where do you think the Jays go here? Because obviously there's questions that need to be answered on the pitching side. Um, what's your viewpoints on what's going on with the rotation this year leading into 2023 and what moves need to be made?
Well, Johnny, I think who's in the best position is Stripling, right? I think
Yeah.
they almost have to re-sign him or somebody of his caliber. And, he's coming off such a big year, and he was kind of that stabilizer on their
He
team,
was
right?
he was kind of an unsung hero
Yeah,
that
yeah,
year for the team.
he was that guy. So, but he's in the driver's seat now, and there's a lot of teams that are going to be chasing him. But the Blue Jays, I can remember when I was there. When you get to a certain level, right? Now you're expected to go that extra mile, whether it's shelling out money to bring in the better players because you don't want to lose that momentum. And there's money to be had. There's money. You don't buy that argument. There's no money, right? Um, but there is limitations. I don't want to get carried away there, but so if you're going to win, you got to have the pitching. Look at the teams that are in it at the end. And Toronto was one of them, right? They got some really good starting pitching, but you always got to try to improve on that. And Barrios, I know they're hoping has a bounce back year as he should. He's been pretty good in the big leagues. Rue is going to be out, until he comes back from that surgery. So you really can't count on him. So, but it's a must. And then also teams, you got to tweak your bullpen a little bit to keep that strong, especially the way the game's played now. If you neglect that, forget it. Because
Yep.
nobody relies on their starters anymore. So you better have that bullpen too. So, yeah, but there's no doubt you've got no chance of winning if your pitching staff isn't strong.
We have a World Series going on, John, and we kind of predicted last week you were going for the Astros, and I was going against the grain and saying the Philadelphia Phillies. And right now, it's tied 1-1. We've had an interesting World Series so far. A lot of offense, and the star pitchers have not really come through. Verlander got hit hard, and a lot of people are saying in that game one he should have been lifted earlier. What's your viewpoint on that?
Well, yeah, I can see that all the way, but I also understand where Dusty's coming from. That here, this is his guy.
Yeah.
You know what? And yeah, they bounced back, but yet he got the big out and got him tied through five, right? Whatever it was. Uh, but yeah, I love starters. Starters usually, your top dogs, especially those aces. But the postseason is totally different. You treat that a tough outing or a guy. He got off to a great start. He was rolling, but then it could be innings catch up with him too. He's like we said earlier. He's not a young guy anymore.
No.
And so you got to handle that always differently. And Dusty's always been one of those guys. He loves his starters too, and he always had the reputation that he's gonna live and die with those guys because that's the generation he played in, right? When he was when the time with the Dodgers and all those great teams and the teams he faced with the Braves, that's what they did. The starters went out there and they go 7-8 innings, and they didn't get blown out like some guys do nowadays. So you're also a product of the type of baseball you're used to, and so,
And
but
everything's ramped up in the postseason anyway. I mean, look at the emotions and look at the energy, and everyone is playing, in some ways extraordinary. Look at Kyle Tucker and what he did for the Stros, and then the Phillies bounced back game one. They got spanked kind of in game two. Wheeler didn't, Wheeler kind of underperformed, but it's the pressure of the World Series. Right now, we're tied 1-2, and we go 1-1, and we're going to Philadelphia, where it should be a crazy next 3 days in the city of brotherly love.
oh yeah, there'll be some fighting going on there. Yeah, you know what? It there's no guarantees. I don't care how good you are. They ambushed. They came right out. Wheeler. They came. He's going to throw it over. They're probably trying to get ahead, even with different pitches, and they got after him. But back to really the pitching real quick. Thompson managed the game, that first game, like you'd see most guys in my era, right? He milked that guy, the starter, as long as he could. And even sent him Nola out there for one hitter before the lefties came up, before he brought in his stud left-hander. That's kind of the way the game used to be, or the game I know. You get as much as you can out of this guy. You play that matchup. Now you got the lefty coming in against their big Alvarez and their big guys, and so I love that. But yeah, the game's different. There's no guarantees. There's no. I guess I guess that's why there's not very many Bob Gibsons and Tom Seavers. Or Bartolo might have thrown 8. He might have hit a home run. Well, no, they don't. They DH now. So.
Well, it's going to be an exciting rest of the World Series. We look forward to covering it next week on the episode here. But right now, John, we're going to get to that part 2 of that interview with the former general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays, the president of baseball operations for the 2021 World Champions, the Atlanta Braves, who gave us a lot of time last week. It was a great conversation. So here is now part 2 of the interview with Alex Anthopoulos.
It is paramount, in my opinion, that whoever's run the team have their own people in place, right? I think that's too. I think it's too important. If you have to inherit somebody, sometimes it's not always the easiest thing in the world, because So I think everybody deserves to have the right guy. And I know when you left, we brought when Beeston left, Mark Shapiro came in. He didn't hire you to begin with. That's part of the game, But I know it wasn't. I guess my point, what I'm trying to say, it wasn't easy when you left, and a lot of fans up there still say, "Where is he? Where is he?"
No, look, I remember it well. Like I remember even, I'd been offered a contract during the summer, and at the time I was going to sign it, and then I just was told, you still have to, you don't know what's going to happen down the road, and maybe you shouldn't rush and so on. And but I remember you asking me at times in August or September, things were rolling. You're like, "Hey, what's going on with your contract? What's going on?" I'm like, and I was staying. I was going to be there. I was excited about where we were headed going forward. We knew we had Vladdy and we had these other young guys, and we still had guys we liked the team and so on. And it was really the decision was made. I remember it was the day my daughter, it was a day of her birth. So September 24th, I remember was the day I decided I'm not going to come back. But prior to September, I was back. I was 100% back. There was no doubt. I had a contract offer, and I was going to get it done. And obviously things changed for me, right? So, and even towards the end, I almost came back too. I mean, I had a amazing meeting with Edward Rogers up at the Rogers offices, and I felt great coming out of that meeting. And I remember crossing the street floor and getting into my car and going home, and I was kind of excited. And then when I woke up the next morning, the same feeling. I'm like, this just doesn't feel right for me. But I didn't, I kept it very quiet, just to myself and my wife. And I didn't want to rob anybody of what we were going on, right? If I had told you about it, I remember the minute we lost in Kansas City, it's the minute I told you in your office, because I'm like, everyone was loving every minute of it. And I was trying to soak it in too at the same time. But I just didn't think it was fair for my issues. One, I didn't want it getting out in the media and being a distraction of the club. 100% on that. And two, it wasn't fair to rob that moment from the coaches and everybody else in front office, uncertainty and all that. There's just no need for that. So I kept it quiet. Yeah, look, tough call, but I was 38 at the time, and I remember even saying it like, look, I may regret this, but it's just a feeling, and right. I always felt like I'd never made a decision in my life because of money. And obviously I offered 5 years and really good money and everything else, and it was great, and it was home, and my wife's family was there, and kids are in school, and the team was good, and there was no reason to not be there. But I would have been doing it for the wrong reasons. And if that was the case, I would have worked at my dad's place. I would have not left. I took a pay cut to go from the Montreal Expos to the Blue Jays at the time, and I had never made decisions at that point in my life based on money or security. I'd always done it based on where I felt would give me the greatest joy, happiness, all those kind of things. And I just had a strong feeling this is just not the right spot for me, and there wasn't anything wrong with that. Like you said, like I came to Atlanta and I had individuals that, I wanted to bring in. Because I could hit the ground running, right? There was a lot of work to do. And there's people obviously that were here that I developed great relationships with that were fantastic. But again, this was my choice, and I easily could have stayed. And I appreciated the fact that I had a chance to stay. But I got to tell you, it was a relief, and instead of like, there was never like the next day, like, oh my God, what did I do? Not at all. It was like, I felt even better about the decision. I just knew it was the right call. I had no idea where it was going to go. And I remember having a conversation saying, 10 years from now, I may look back when I'm 48, I'm 45 now, and say it's the biggest mistake of my life. But I kept it pretty simple with my decision making when it came to career choices. And same way that, I remember when I started working in baseball, I got a job offer at Fidelity, the big, financial corporation. And I was living with my aunt at the time. And she thought it was crazy to go take an unpaid internship with the Expos. I was 23 because it was a good paying job, a lot of upside. But again, I made a decision that I felt would be best for me. And, it's a really simple outlook, but I think at the end, like, I didn't have to be a GM again. I just wanted to be happy where I was, who I worked with, who I worked for. And, going to LA was awesome. And then who knew? Like, if that doesn't happen, I don't end up in Atlanta. We don't win a World Series, all those things. Like, who knows what would have happened? But I think it was the best for all sides. I think Toronto's in unbelievable shape. Playoff team, exciting team. I think it worked out for all sides. And it was a decision I had to make, as hard as it was. The hardest part was to leave all the staff, right? And the people and so on. But I just felt like it was bound to happen one way or the other. So it was the right time to do it.
Oh yeah, when you were good to them, man, they all appreciate it. I just think you wanted to become a U.S. citizen or something, or
I will say this. You know what? I mean, obviously, I'm very proud Canadian, as you well know.
No doubt.
Yeah, but the longer I've been here, I've really enjoyed it. I got to tell you, especially, look, did I ever think I'd end up in California in the South? My wife's born in Portugal, moved to Toronto when she was 9. And who knew when she got married, she'd live in California for 2 years. She's saying y'all now living in Atlanta. I can't believe that. My kids don't. But she'll just like slide it in there,
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
It's great though. This place is a great place to live. Schools are great. The people are great. And look, we still go back to Canada in the summers. My in-laws are there. A lot of families there, so they get the best of both worlds. But it's been great, and I wouldn't have known that 7 years ago, 8 years ago when I left. But it's been a great development. You never know where life's going to lead you, but it definitely has worked out across the board.
Do you got your ring on? Do you by chance you got your ring on?
I'm not doing that.
I don't either.
You know what? We went to the
we went your shoulder wearing that thing.
We went to the White House, and I didn't even think to bring it. That would have been the time to bring it. And I don't want to be that guy, wearing the ring. But I do at some point want to wear it somewhere. But I have it at home, and to me, all that kind of stuff is.
Get another one.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know what you did with yours. Probably sitting somewhere in between the pillows of your couch.
Well, I got so many of them,
That's right. So no, but it's cool. I mean, getting a ring was awesome, and
well,
being able to, I never felt like, oh, my career, it has to happen, because I know how hard it is. But when it does happen, then you're really grateful that it does, and you feel like you've got something, that you've got an attachment now to the city forever, right? No matter what. Look, hopefully we're here for 20 years, but that you did something good for the city, one way or the other.
You know what you did, though? You know what you did?
What?
You know what you did? Like in 2015, right? The team was kind of spread around. You made some key deals, right? Things that were hard to do. I set the team on fire. When you won the World Series a couple years ago, you guys were just, it was very similar. You made some of the best deals you can make in baseball, and people, and even some deals that people kind of might not look at. Well, these aren't like, there was no.
Yeah, look, you need a little bit of luck.
It came together, so that comes back to your instincts. You got to feel what makes a team win. It's not always necessarily the most talent. Yeah, you got to have talent. You ain't winning without talent. But there's something's got to mix. And I look at your team, right? And even back then when they were a bunch of hard-nosed guys that played the game the right way and got after it. And then you combine them with a great coaching staff and a great front office. That's how you win. There's no secret. It's not easy. That's how you win.
Yeah, no, and I'll say this. I think certain things I've learned and appreciate, like the games played column. I remember when we made the Donaldson trade, and Brett Laurie was super talented. We had him together, but just he was just bad luck. He'd get hurt, and or even some of the guys we had on the roster, just a lot of guys would get hurt, right? And they're talented, and they would just you'd have to replace them. Your next line of defense, your next group of players weren't as good, and I really started to appreciate the games played column. And Donaldson was an example of that. And you look at what we have here now, even when I got here, Nick Markakis, Freddie Freeman, Kurt Suzuki, those guys played every day. And I know we got to give guys, load management like they use in the NBA.
Oh, no.
I know, hold on a second, but I think it's a mentality. And we had both had Mark Burley together. And Mark Burley taught me a lot because that guy could have gone on the IL a million times, right? And there's a mentality to it.
Yeah.
And I look at the games played column. I know it's a simple thing to look at, but it's a big deal, right? And look, we lived through it. All of a sudden, someone's on the mound, someone's got a hamstring or a quad, or fantasy football starting, and this guy's don't want to play, or the team's out of it. And those guys that post day in and day out, there's a mentality that comes with it because they easily could go on the IL. And I think it rubs off on the rest of the team.
Yeah, it is a badge
but it took
of honor,
being
man.
around guys like Burley and some of these other guys that did it. And we have that here. Olsen plays every day. Dansby Swanson, Riley, Harris played every single inning. Travis d'Arnaud caught every inning of the postseason for us. So they set a tone. They set an expectation. And I think it's part of it. And I think, you look at 2021 trade deadline for us, our clubhouse was a little flat. We had talent, but we were down, right? We got punched in the stomach a bunch. And I felt like we needed to get some life and some energy. And I had Jock Peterson in LA. He's a fun-loving guy. He walks into that clubhouse, you can't help but smile. He's got a swagger, a charisma. He was the type of guy that we bring him in. I didn't know what he was going to do performance-wise, but I know we needed him. Followed it up the next day with a guy like Vogt. Same thing. High character, funny, charismatic. Just people gravitate to him. Our guys were down in the dumps, and rightfully so. Acuna got hurt. Anderson got hurt. We weren't playing well. We had so many guys that were out, and those guys were going to come in. I remember talking to both of them saying, hey, I need you guys to be you and to pick this group up because the talent's there. And then look, obviously guys started playing better and so on, but that clubhouse piece is huge. And we saw it in Toronto. We got LaTroy Hawkins. I remember him taking all the relievers out to dinner one night, what Price did. He bought everybody the robes and brought everybody together. The energy was awesome. And the group we had was awesome. The people we had were awesome. And it was exciting to walk into that clubhouse. And, there was past years where I wasn't excited, with the group or this or that. And to this day, I want a group that I feel comfortable when I go down there. I'm excited about the guys. Yeah, you want to win. But I don't want to walk in and, one guy's coming down the hall. I'm looking to go right or left because I don't want to have to have a conversation.
No, there's more, but you got to see, but you
quality of life. Quality of life.
Yeah, but sometimes it takes more than having the best player, right? There's somebody that energizes the team because it's an emotional game, But everybody doesn't recognize that, or they refuse to.
I think it took us having to lose a bunch with talented group and saying, why aren't we getting over the hump?
No, I got you. Oh yeah, no doubt.
And if we don't, again, it was awful to go through those seasons. But I think I even said this my last press conference with the Blue Jays, my end of season wrap up in 2015. I think I even said I felt like just like a player, maybe you find your swing or your pitcher and you'd have been walking guys and you find your delivery and you start to repeat your mechanics. I think I said at the time, I'm I think I'm starting to put it all together as a GM, starting to understand it. And it was just a sense of I'm not just going to chase talent. Yes, you need talent to win, like we talked about, but I'm really going to start weighing the other things. And I didn't before. The way I weighed clubhouse makeup was, I'll get one Mark DeRosa, one Henry Blanco, 2 of 25, and the rest is fine. It just doesn't work that way, right? And but that's how I viewed makeup and character. I'll just get a guy or two, and I check the box, and it just doesn't work. So I definitely went into 2014 offseason with a real mindset. I remember we went out to the Arizona Fall League. We had some meetings. We brought you out as well. And I also thought, what I learned too was, I remember bringing you out to the Fall League that offseason. What I learned from it was getting the manager involved, I think is important because, I saw it. I don't want to name names, but, there's players that you didn't want that we as a front office, not me, but that we may have signed and you just weren't on board to begin with. And again, you were going to do what you could. You do your best, but your instincts were right about, hey, this isn't the right guy. This isn't the right fit. And you ended up being right. And I just felt like if we were going to go down the path and sign someone or trade for someone, if you were uncomfortable, uneasy, because you had a feel for the room and a pulse, I wasn't going to do it, because ultimately, the minute it was going to go south, you'd use the line, "You signed him."
Oh yeah, hey, you signed the guy.
Your favorite line. I didn't sign him.
You know, it's funny.
So,
JP one time called me. We were in Texas. This was when he was the GM, and he was. We had a makeup game. Halliday had pitched, and then we were in Detroit, and they came back. And I didn't use this left-hander. I think it was Cecil even back that time because he was banged up or something. He called me. I'm in Texas. My family's coming to town. And it was like 5 a.m, and he says, "How come you didn't do the lefty?" And I'm going, "What?" So we were kind of going back and forth, and finally I said to him, "If you start signing some better players, this wouldn't even be an issue." And he hung up on me.
That's true. That's the type of thing he would say. No doubt about it.
It was all in good fun.
But the beauty of it, to me, it was like, if I had you involved in the decision-making process, ultimately, the money had to work and so on. But, if you were really against a signing, it was probably a lot of thought that went into it. You talked to someone, or you knew the room, or whatever. And it's something that we as a front office needed to hear. And if you were on board with it, we talked through the scenarios, how you're going to use the players. And, to this day, we're setting up the postseason roster and so on. I always tell our manager now, like, it's nice front office might have this opinion, that opinion. Like, you're the one who's going to make the decision. If you're not going to use so-and-so, I don't care how much we might think. Like, if you're not comfortable, we're not put them on the roster. There's no point, right? So I think it's the same way that when you're doing trades, you're making signings and so on. Again, is the manager making the decisions? No, but it's the whole, you're buying the groceries and he's got to cook. And you got to work together. You really do.
Yeah, you do.
Otherwise, it's a mess.
But that's how you hold them accountable. Well, you wanted this. No,
absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody should be accountable for the decisions they
We're
make.
all pulling the same rope at that point. But also, you also can avoid some things, right? Because there's just a perspective that we will not have in the front office, that the coaches and the manager will have a different perspective. And that's from not having done the job, not being down there day in and day out. It's one thing. You guys have to live with these players day in and day out. And there's also, I look at it the same way. Like, if I put someone down there that's not the best clubhouse guy, I'm affecting the clubhouse staff, the trainers, strength and conditioning guys, the coaches, the manager, the support staff, the travel guy. And I'm not around. Like, I don't want someone doing that to me. I don't want someone dumping employees on me that I know are not good teammates, not good guys. It's just not a good place to work. It's going to affect the mood, affect all of it. So
unless he's really, really good, then sometimes
look, at that point though, you would sign off and say, I'm in, and we'll say, hey, I'll tolerate it, I'll live with it, and we'll go in with our eyes wide open. But I think it's important we can sit there and break down value and the numbers and everything else in the office, but I do think you have to have everybody on the same page. Now, small signings, whatever, but I think it's critically important. Look, that was part of the learning curve for me, right? Just doing that, and bringing you into off-season meeting. I remember going out to the fall league and going to games together, and then we'd meet as a group, and we'd have the free agents and trades, and we would talk about it, and you gave really good insights. And it was just a perspective
too. I mean, we're all
we didn't have
got all the answers. Nobody's got all the answers.
Yeah, but that's how you get better, right?
The key is you got to work together. It doesn't mean you're going to agree. You may have your fights and all that. But if everybody, at least when it's all said and done, you know what, this is what we're going to do it, and everybody's going to support it. That's what matters. That's how you become successful. And then there's no room for backbiting or anything like that, because you know what? You had your say, or you understand how it works. You signed off on it in the end. Because if you don't sign off on it, then take a hike. You know what I mean?
Well, I remember calling you about the Tulo deal, and you're like, obviously you love Tulo as a player, and I was telling you, hey, it's so many years. What?
Was that 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when you called?
Yeah, it was early. But I remember you were kind of hemming and hawing back and forth, and you're like, and I just kind of dropped it on you. And I don't know, I think like at 2 or 3 in the morning, I called you back and said, I did the deal. And you're like, what? And you were just shocked. I said, you know what, come to the stadium. You're in bed. We got to call Reyes. You got to come in here. So we're in your office at 1 or 2 in the morning. We got to get Jose Reyes to show up. And it was a weird day, right? The next day, the clubhouse was flat, and because Tulo hadn't been there. And then the next day, he showed up. It's a homer off Jerome Williams, and then the team just, exploded. But I remember the day after, the reaction was not great, because I guess guys were sad to lose a teammate. But I know that was nuts. I remember when you came in, and you were just like I think I talked to you maybe 10 hours earlier, 8 hours earlier, and you're like, you just kind of weigh it. You're weighing it, and then we had lost Ben Zobrist to the Royals, And I knew we needed to solve the defense at short because we had Reyes under contract for 2 more years. And I knew, like, no matter what, we had to solve that. That was the first thing. Even if we weren't going to win in 15, we had to. I was thinking about 16, 17, and so on. We had to solve it going forward. So that's why it was the first move, because the defense
Hey,
had to be solved.
I'm going to tell you, I think that was the most impactful move of it all because you remember the balls, and I love Reyes. We all love Reyes and all that. But, he was getting old. Balls were trickling through that infield that had to be caught at the big league level.
Oh yeah, I remember the Royals series before the All-Star break. That was a rough series in Kansas City, and yeah, and it was. I remember Tulo led the team in RBI in the playoffs for us. He had huge hits. He was
Yeah.
awesome.
But I think that was the key. Price was great. He was like 91, I think, something like that. He had a huge impact. But the defense, you got Tulo just cleaned all that up, and then you Ben Revere out in left field, so we weren't running Colabello and Valencia.
Oh yeah, we were running Colabello, Valencia on the corners.
That was worse than when Stairsy was out there at 40 years
Leonardo
old.
Navarro. But I remember Colabello. We called up. You're the one who brought up the idea.
He
He was
could hit,
he was
man. He could
killing
go
it in the
great.
minor leagues. I don't know, we needed offense or something. But I remember you saying, "What about calling up Colabello and let's give him a shot?" And we didn't. I think we had Smoke and Valencia, but you were the one who brought up Colabello, calling him up, and I'm like, yeah, you know what, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. And you're willing to put him out there in the outfield, and but
Well,
that's what I mean. Like, ideas come from all over the place. But when we got better defensively, Batista went back to right, Revere in left, and then we
yes.
had Tulo, and then all of a sudden the defense dramatically. And look, and I'll say this too, that changed things for me too, because I really started to value defense immensely once we made all those changes. Because our run differential at the time was great, but we lost games, right? They were close games. When
Yes.
we won 10-2, but then we lost. We'd lose close games because of an error and this and that. And we had a better team than the one loss was in the month of July. We knew that. We had guys
Yeah.
having MVP seasons and so on. And tightening up the defense, all of a sudden the rotation just exploded, and team was really good.
Exactly. So, what do you got, Johnny?
I'm just fascinated and I'm just listening to you two talk to each other, and it's an amazing experience. I mean, how many times does this get to happen where, a GM, a manager get together? Your synergy between each other is incredible. So, I did have a question for Alex in regard to John, because obviously his talent evaluation skills led you to bring him in as a special assignment scout for the Braves. So tell us what that experience was like, and was John a good scout?
Yeah, I mean, I think I even told him there was a guy he loved in the draft 2 years ago that the industry didn't have high. And one thing I like about Gibby, and I appreciate about him, is that he doesn't care where you're ranked, what the hype is. He's going to call it like he sees it. And he's seen a lot of good players, guys that didn't pan out, and so on. And there's a track record and a trust that I have that he's not going to get swayed because so and so tells him this guy's going in the first round or the third round and so on. I remember sending him a note when the player was going off. I'm like, I remember you put a 6 on him. You have a 2 to 8 scale from a scouting standpoint. 6 is a well above average player, an all-star caliber player. But we sent him out to see guys that we consider in the first round high. And look, if he was uneasy with a guy and he really didn't want him, I wasn't doing it. And I know, again, and ultimately we'd end up getting there as a group regardless. But and this isn't because I like him or we're friends. Like, there was no charity to this stuff ever, right? It's he can help the team win. I mean, friends
Yeah.
will get you fired. So yeah, the friendship piece is nice, but in these positions, you hire people because you think they can help you and they can impact your club. But there's so many times he made me a way better GM being in that chair. Look, obviously he was there to manage and deal with the clubhouse and the players. And there's so many examples of things that I learned along the way. I remember I was on a scouting trip, and when he decided to send Pilar down, he called me. I wasn't there, but I remember we had an issue with the player years earlier, not with Gibby, that we didn't send the player down. We should have done it. And when he called me to do it, I'm like, absolutely do it, because it was the right thing for the organization. It was the right thing for the player. Pilar will tell you this day, I'm pretty sure, that it was the right thing for him. But I needed to empower him that way. But there's just so many examples of that I've used in my experiences with him, whether when I was with LA and we were going through some things, I'd use some examples. Or I remember telling, our broadcaster here is Jeff Francoeur, who ended up having some good season. I remember Gibby at the time, I was, it was first year or something. Jeff Francoeur was available as 25th guy, minor league deal. He knew him. He wanted to sign him, and I was uneasy. The performance, the numbers, this, that, and it was dumb. It was the wrong thing. I mean, and that's as a GM. Manager wants a 25th guy on the roster. Give him the 25th guy on the roster. But you need to kind of look. And he made me better in that way, and I think that's made me better as a GM. Whether I'm dealing with Brian here in Atlanta, when I was a special assistant, VP in LA, we had to make decisions like that. I just think like learning the relationship and the give and take. And there's times where GM wants to do something the manager's not a fan of, or manager wants to do something GM's not a fan of. It's a partnership. It really is. If you don't view it as a partnership, it isn't going to work no matter what. But what I appreciated was I knew the clubhouse was taken care of. It was never going to be drama. There was never going to be issues. He had his finger on the pulse. He had the respect of the players. They weren't going to, go afoul of him. And also, there's a lot of things that he took care of behind closed doors that the media would never know about, right? Closed door meetings, this and that. I never needed to go check and say, did you bring so-and-so in? Did you talk to this guy? It was already done. He was already 10 steps ahead of it. He knew when to pull guys in. He knew when he had to I don't want to say make a scene, but I thought his instincts and his feel were very good, that if he had to do something on the bench in front of the cameras because the player put him in that position to do it, he had the instincts to do it. He wasn't afraid to do it. And then he also knew when the time was to do it behind closed doors in the office. And a lot of guys don't have that. They don't have the confidence. They're not sure. And the players can smell that and see through that in a minute. And look, beyond that, I thought he managed the bullpen really well. And I remember anytime if someone wanted to criticize, I'd always tell them, your job is to win the game. You won the game. I don't care about what this guy's opinion is, that guy's opinion, and get the job done. This is a results-oriented. I think it's Winston Churchill as the quote. No matter how beautiful the process, you should consider the results. And I'm into everything else that looks great, but it's a results-oriented business. And at the end of the day, you got to get it done and have the respect of the players. And even when we hired him a second time, and I knew it would be a controversial hire just because you're coming off a bad year and so on, I called some of his former players and poked around on it. And, they all raved about him, all of them. And I didn't just pick a position player. Well, I went all angles, reliever, starter, position player. Everybody came back the same way. And look, it's like Gibby said, sometimes you don't have the right roster, this and that. Change was made when it was made, but he was always good, and he just didn't have the roster at times, or the division was tough, really tough back then. And he just needed another opportunity, but it wasn't because it was giving him a chance. It was because he was good, and there's a lot of examples, Joe Torre, Terry Francona, that the first time maybe didn't go as well as it needed to go. The next time around, you see what they really could do. And those guys, some of them, obviously Torre's in the Hall of Fame, and I think Terry Francona is going to end up being there. So
are you saying
I think there's just so much that goes into it. Yeah, I think you're going to fall a little short. But
all right, one last funny story I got, and then we got to let you go, man. I'm sure you got to, because nobody works the phone lines harder than you. But you're talking a minute ago about giving giving the manager a say on let's say the 25th guy, or letting him handle the dirty work or whatever. And it goes back to, I had that incident with Hillenbrand, right? And JP was a GM at the time. And so, everything's gone. I haven't talked to Shea, but I got no problems. Shea, I like Shea. He did good. So anyway, in that our confrontation meeting with the team, I said something about, hey, you know what? You want out? He said, it's either me or you. The front office can, if they choose to keep you, I'm out of here. I got no problem with that, or whatever. It was one of those. That was, exactly what was said, but something along those lines. So anyway, JP comes in the next day. Of course, the next day we ended up releasing Hillenbrand, right?
You got DFA'd that night, which I respect JP because, he was a productive player making good money. It happens before the game. During the game, he DFAs him, which is, he could have said, let cooler heads prevail. Let's talk about this. Trade value, all this stuff. He could have easily pumped the brakes. And I respect JP that he had the instincts in the field to say, we got to make a move. Now, he may not have been happy about being put in that position.
But that's my point. He came to me later and said, hey, listen now, you can't be saying that to everybody because, there's a lot of time those players are going to win over you, man. So be careful who you say that to.
That's right. But he knew. He had great look. JP had great feel, great instincts. Yes. His in-game stuff was great. And you learn from everybody you work with, right? You take
Yeah,
something away
and,
from all of
and
them,
enjoy it. Have fun with it.
no
But
doubt.
hey, listen, man, it's a pleasure to have you on here. We congratulate you. We all know how good you are. It's good to see you. Reap the rewards of all the hard work and the dreams and all that. And I can guarantee all the guys that played for you in Toronto and the guys that are right now in Atlanta respect the heck out of you. Thank you. It's more than just a business relationship, and they appreciate you for who you are. And continue success. Hey, you didn't realize I was such a media darling, did you?
I know you're very smooth. You're actually more coherent than I expect you to be.
Oh
Sometimes you
God!
have to really lean in.
Maybe
You're like,
maybe your
I
volume
need the
is
John Gibbons translator. And you know what? What is it? You're sitting appropriately in a chair. You don't put your feet up anymore.
well,
What
you can't
happened to you? You
you can't
sold
pull it
out.
up.
You
Hey, just
sell
say,
out.
hey, when you figure out my language here, listen, you'll be able to speak 6 languages, not
That's
just
right.
5. You will have 6 under your belt.
That's right. That's right.
Hey,
It's
thanks, pal.
been a
All
pleasure.
right, guys.
Thank
Really
you,
glad to be
Alex.
on.
That was a great interview. Part 2. Alex Anthopoulos. I really enjoyed that. Everything we've done since starting the show, John. I mean, that for me was just an amazing interview, and it was just kind of like to get the inside information from a guy who's so many people respect, and look what he's done. I mean, congratulations on bringing him on again. It was just
No,
fabulous.
you know what, Johnny? He's one of Bartolo. He's one of the good guys. I mean, really, he's a humble guy. He's down to earth, and I think what fans enjoy is a lot of times you get the news, the clips, or you get people just scratch the surface. Because I told you, Bobby Cox told me one time when you're talking to the media, the first time I met him, because Toronto's got a big media, right? And he'd been there, and he said, he goes, what I try to do? He says, I talk a lot and give them nothing. I said, that's perfect for me. That's all I ever do. So if you think about it, kind of some of the things he was talking about, Alex was talking about, is a little more in depth, and people really like that because they're not aware of a lot of that stuff. It's genuine. So it's a
And it's
little bit
based on the
different.
relationship you've had with him over all these years. I mean, there was a comfort level there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And like I said before, we've had our battle. We've had battles that, we had disagreements on things, the healthy stuff, that you're supposed to do in baseball. And then you figure something out and you go with it. And you got to remember, too, he was my boss. Everybody's got a boss. He had a boss, was a beast in the president. The president's got a boss. It's the guy that owns the team. So, things trickle downhill, man.
That is quite true. It's going to be time for another Ask Gibby segment. And of course, each and every week, we do have a few questions for John, and this is brought to you by Budweiser. If we do select your question here on the podcast, you will receive a gift package from Budweiser because that's what buds do. So now it's time to Ask Gibby. We have question number 1, John, and this comes from the Gmail account. Where did I keep this Halloween based this week? And this comes from Ryan Matilla. From the Gmail, Ask Gibby Show at gmail.com. It says, Hi, Gibby. Love the podcast. In a departure from a baseball question and in the spirit of Halloween, what's your favorite scary movie? Cheers and keep up the good work, Ryan.
Ooh, gosh. Actually, I don't necessarily like scary movies anymore now that I get older, but I got to go with Halloween. Mike Myers back in the day, and Jamie Lee Curtis. I don't remember how old when I first saw that when it first came out, but it was because it was real. A lot of these nowadays are, they're there's no way they could be accurate.
Would that come out in the 70s?
Had to have, yeah, it had to be the 70s, yeah. So and the music in it,
Yeah, that was kind of a really scary one. I remember seeing that one in the movies the first time, but the one that got to me was The Exorcist.
Oh.
And that was I mean, I literally couldn't sleep for several days because that was the scariest thing I'd ever seen at that point in my life.
That's what you hear about exorcisms, I mean they actually happen and things like that. But there was something about that movie that and I think a couple shows ago I remember seeing your head spun all the way 360 all the way around, and
Yeah, that's when the Mets were eliminated.
That's the show.
That's what happened. Yeah. It happens every year in October.
Oh God.
We got another question for you. This one comes from the Twitter account at John Gibbons05, and this one username is Rico and Barry, and his question is: what was the scariest team you've ever seen assembled on the field? You looked at their lineup and said, "Wow, this is a scary lineup."
Oh gosh. We had a couple years where we were really scary. There's no doubt. But from the other side, I got to go back to probably the Yankees and the Red Sox when they were really the Yankees and the Red Sox when I was a player. I can go back as a kid and you look at all those Yankees, Red Sox, same thing, and it's just from the Jeter, Bernie Williams, Posada, that group, Clemens, Pettit, you're going, wow, and it never ends, right? It's top to bottom, Cano, and in the same way with the Red Sox, Ortiz, Manny Ramirez, Trot Nixon, Johnny Damon, Veritek, and then Schilling on the mound and the Papelbon, all this. I can't leave out Mariano Rivera from the Yankees. That's kind of when the Yankees and the Red Sox were really the Yankee and the Red Sox.
I mean, those teams were built to win every year, and as a manager in the same division, I mean, you'd have to look at them and say, look how much money they've spent. Look at the guys they've assembled.
Yeah, but it's all about winning. But the '86 Mets, as far as a player, that was a scary lineup. I guarantee you facing that team because it wasn't that. I mean, it was tough to get through that lineup anyway. And they had the pitching, they had everything, right? And they would fight you. You know what? So there's, they weren't going to sit there and hug you like you see all the time nowadays because that's baseball was different. But yeah, there's been a lot of scary ones. I gotta put those up there top.
Yeah, well, those are certainly scary teams if you're an opposing player or manager for sure. And as a member of the '86 Mets, you were there, right, with one of the scariest teams in the history of the game, those '86 Mets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's going to wrap up this segment. And of course, those two questions are going to get these great Budweiser gift packs, courtesy of Budweiser. That's what buds do. If you want your question to be read here to Gibby, all you got to do is send us an email, askgibbyshow@gmail.com, or use the hashtag Ask Gibby on the Twitter account. And we will, there's so many that are coming in now. I mean, the questions that are pouring in, it's hard to select two. But these questions are amazing, John, and we'll have more next week. And finally, kind of in conjunction or a little synergy with Halloween, there was a scary moment that might have taken place in a Calgary Flames hockey game, a post-game press conference. Daryl Sutter was asked about the disappearance of a player during the game. Let's go to that clip right now, and then we'll get your reaction to it, John.
Huberdeau left the bench for a little bit in the first period. Are you able to say what it was?
I think he had to go take a shit.
I did see that. I was laughing, and Sutter didn't hide anything. He's one of the old throwbacks, right? And I was thinking, gosh, I don't know if that ever happened when I was around. Maybe it happened to me, but I don't know about any of my players.
It happened to you?
No, not that. But you know what? It's funny. I guess it's funny. It's funny to some, maybe not everybody, but I used to drink a lot of diet sodas and water, right? Or some kind of caffeine. So I used to have to go to the bathroom a lot in between innings. And so, so there's a hallway to lead up the clubhouse. So I was up there almost every half inning. So a 9-inning game, whatever. You do the math, but it's so funny. Greg Zahn gave me a nickname. He was called Flomax, right? and to help you control those things. And so part of it was nervous energy, part of it was the caffeine and all the liquids in my body. But so that's kind of Zani and my joke. And later in my life, I even took some of that at one time. So little did I know back then, I didn't think he was very smart, but Zani should have been a doctor. So
there you go, Zani the doctor.
Maybe that's who we need sponsoring the show, Flomax.
Let's go after him.
Because if we do, it'll flow really smoothly.
It will be a nice flow to it, won't it? Well, that's going to about wrap up this edition of the Gibby Show. Once again, a pleasure to be here with you. If you want to reach out to John, I mean, he's all over social media. Just look for at John Gibbons 05. Wherever you go, he's there. My handle is at John Arezzi. Until next week when we talk more baseball with you, this is John for John. Happy Halloween, everybody, and have a great week.
Bartolo, vámonos.